Hey, good morning. I'm Sean Griffin. This is Morning Cup of Context. This morning I was reading in the book of John. I came across the story of the woman that was brought before Jesus that said that she was caught in adultery. And it's in John chapter 8. I just want to go over it real quick because there's some great context that I rarely ever hear anyone actually explain in this passage. So John chapter 8, and it's verses 3 through 5. It says, "The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, 'Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act. Now, in the law Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say?'" Now, okay, so this is an interesting scene, right? Because they're bringing this lady forward. They claim she's been caught in the act, okay? Now, the next verse is very important, not only because it helps us understand, that there's something awry in this story, but also it follows up really well with what we just read in verse 5. So it's verse 6. It says, "They were saying this, testing him, so that they might have grounds for accusing him." Well, what were they testing him about? Well, in verse 5, remember, it says that their quote was, "Now in the law, Moses commands us to stone this lady." So their premise of their testing of him was to see if he knew the law, right? And that's very important, okay? Because, well, let's look at the law of adultery real quick, all right? It's in Leviticus 20, verse 10. It says, "If there's a man who commits adultery with another man's wife, one who commits adultery with his friend's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death." Well, here in this story, we only have the woman brought forward. Where's the man, right? It doesn't say that she was engaging in any other. It says adultery, right? Caught in the very act. Okay, so where's the man, right? This is already right off the bat. The scribes and the Pharisees are disobeying the law, right? So they're transgressing the law in accusing this woman, bringing her to judgment, or bringing her for a declaration of judgment without the right pieces in place, okay, outside of the bounds described in the actual law. Then in Deuteronomy 19, we see it's actually very dangerous for them according to the law, because there are protections against false accusations. Now, I'm not entirely sure that this lady was innocent. Okay, there are some things in the story that lead us to believe that it's very possibly she was caught in the act of adultery, but there's an inherent risk, there's an inherent liability, if you will, to these scribes and Pharisees if they bring her forward outside of the bounds of the law for judgment, right? So in Deuteronomy 19, verse 16 to 19, it says, "If a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing, then both the men who have the dispute shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who will be in the office in those days. The judges shall investigate thoroughly, and if the witness is a false witness, he has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him just as he has intended to do to his brother." All right, so this law of the false witness, right, it actually required an investigation by the judges, right? So here's the second part of this story with John in the book of John, chapter 8. This woman being brought by the Pharisees and scribes before Jesus. They should be bringing this woman, they should be taking her to the priests and the judges. So they're, what I'm saying? Because if they have supposedly caught her in the act of doing this, then Jesus was not a priest or a judge. He was, that wasn't his role during that time of his earthly ministry. So that's number two, they're outside, okay, of the bounds of the law. They're not doing the actual law. But there's actually there's interesting about this passage in Deuteronomy, because it says the judges will investigate thoroughly. So if they find out that it's a false accusation, then the person making the accusation gets the punishment that they were trying to have the falsely accused receive. Okay, so if the punishment in this case would be death, and after an investigation, it's found out that the woman actually, didn't commit adultery, then these scribes and Pharisees themselves would be stoned, because they would be a false witness. You see what I'm saying? And that's very interesting. Now, there's also something else in verse 15 of Deuteronomy 19 that says that shows us where, at least the details given to us in the book of John shows us that there was no mention of 2 or 3 witnesses, right? It says this lady was caught in the act. Okay, well, for one, you forgot to bring the man with you. Okay, so you're showing bias and favoritism right there, which is against the law, as you're perverting justice. But 2, you didn't bring him to the priest and the judge, you brought him to someone else, okay, for judgment. And 3, where are your witnesses? Okay, if you're clearly out of bounds of what the law defines in this circumstance, because in Deuteronomy 19:15 it says, "A single witness shall not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin which he has committed. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed." All right, so this lady's being accused, and she says she was caught in the act. So it doesn't quite detail how many people showed up and how many scribes and Pharisees brought this woman before Jesus. But it's a plural, right? So we can imagine it's a minimum of 2. Okay. So if she was caught in the act, if it was 2, then Deuteronomy 19 is fulfilled. But at the same time, when do people have adultery out in public, right? So this is very interesting. This is a very fine line here, right? And this is why an accusation, right, that can't be easily proven, cannot be established on one witness. So we know the man, if the woman's having an adulterous affair, the man she's having the affair with, he's not a valid witness, right? He can't just turn around and say, "Oh, I witnessed her having an affair with me." It doesn't work like that. So she is not a valid witness, right? She's the one actually being accused and trying to be sentenced. So whomever caught them, where are they? And there has to be more than one, right? You cannot just have one person come up and condemn someone else judicially. So this is very interesting here that we have a bunch of scribes and Pharisees bringing forth, but did an entire group of scribes and Pharisees stumble upon these people, catch them in the act? So what I'm saying is there's a missing validity of the 2 witnesses that need to be in a case like this. So I put down here there's 3 legal infractions in this story. Number 1, the man is the adulterer, as Leviticus 20:10 tells us, and it was not brought with the woman who's called the adulteress. All right. Number 2, the witnesses were not present. And number 3, the woman was not taken to the priest for judgment. All right. So what does this mean? This means that the Pharisees and scribes bring this lady forth under the wrong pretense, under the wrong process, and they're actually in danger of receiving the same penalty if they're found out to be lying, of being stoned. Right. So is it any wonder when Jesus tells them, "Hey, he who's without sin cast the first stone"? Now I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it's see, he was so smart. He's saying he who's without sin. See, we all sin, we all mess up. He's so forgiving, he's so merciful. He instead of fulfilling the law, he let her go." And those are people who claim that Jesus did away with the law, right? When that's not true at all. This whole concept was about the law. He wasn't superseding the law. He was actually subtly calling them out for being outside of the bounds of the law. And that's something very important. I hope people can catch with this, because they actually twist it to say he was skirting the law and just showing mercy. And I'm like, no. Actually, the woman was being brought before the wrong process, right? So the Pharisees themselves were actually the ones in danger of actually being prosecuted according to the law and receiving the death penalty. And so when Jesus comes forward, in my opinion, he's surely not talking about any sin in their own life, right? Everyone knew they sinned, but he's calling them out on, you guys right now are sinning. You guys right now are transgressing the law. 2 for sure, 3 possibly, all right? And that 3rd one's the big one, because if the 3rd one's legit, you could actually receive the punishment you're trying to make me cast on this woman here. So there's this is an incredibly tense moment. It's wild, but ultimately, I'm sure, anyone who knew the law was standing by probably looked at Jesus and was like, "This is a trap.
It's a trap."
Yes, and maybe just as dramatic as that. That's right. But yeah, that's the idea. The adulterous woman, Jesus does say in John chapter 8, verses 10 and 11, he says, straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go. From now on, sin no more." Now he tells a couple people this, right? After he either heals them or encounters with them, he tells them to go and sin no more. Now, yes, maybe people think, well, maybe this is saying that she was, that she was an adulteress. Maybe she was guilty. And maybe she was. But the point was, she could not be prosecuted outside of the bounds of the law. Okay? So he could not legally cast judgment on him. Not, for one, it wasn't his place. And 2, the circumstances of the law weren't fulfilled. So there was already grace. There was already mercy within the law for a process, right? You couldn't just grab someone doing something wrong or falsely accuse someone, right? And so Jesus passed the test of the law, which is why the scribes and the Pharisees walked away. Because had they pressed the issue, it could have been found out that they were guilty and not the woman. Or in addition to the woman, right? It's because they were prosecuting her wrong, okay, and they were actually disobeying the law. So anyway, guys, I hope that brings some clarity to this idea, and I appreciate you joining me this morning. If you like these videos, just like, share, and subscribe. Head on over to my YouTube page, Kingdom in Context, and subscribe, tap the bell, and you get notifications for new videos like this, and I appreciate you guys. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.